Welcome, everybody. My name is Art Gerstein. I'm with Donor Tech. I have with me Sean Steele, who is actually the developer of ReceipterPro. Today, we're going to show you a demonstration of ReceipterPro 2.4. So the ground rules of this demo are that Sean is going to give a very short overview, and so I would greatly appreciate it if you would hold your questions until the end. Thank you. Take it away, Sean.
Great, thanks, Arthur. Okay, so what we're going to do today is give you a very short and concise demo of the features and functionality that's built into the ReceipterPro application. We won't have time to go through all of the features, but after the demo is complete, you'll have a very good understanding of what the software is capable of and how easy it is to use. So we're going to start by importing a list of gifts that we want to receipt. So we can do this a number of different ways, but you always start the process the same way by clicking this button in the top left-hand corner that says Create Receipts. So once you click on that button, you're given a series of options for importing your gifts. Now, in order for you to receipt gifts through ReceipterPro, you first have to tell ReceipterPro which gifts you want to generate receipts for. And there are a number of ways to do that. The first option is to simply import all of the gifts from Razor's Edge which haven't already been receipted. The next option is to import gifts via a RA batch. So if your particular organization groups all of your gifts into batches, you can simply select the batch that you want to receipt. Another option is to import your gifts via RE query. So if you have a query that's set up in Razor's Edge, you can simply select that query from ReceipterPro and it will run the query and then import all of the gifts that the query returns. The next option is to import a list of CSV files. Now this could be a list of a lot of gift information, as so long as the gift ID is somewhere included in the CSV file. And the last option is to import gifts via a custom search. So you could specify, for example, a constituent ID or gift ID, etc. So I'm going to go ahead and just demo two of these options here so that we don't take up too much time. And I'll start with the importing gifts via the RE query. So if I click this option, ReceipterPro will give you a list of all of the queries that you currently have set up in Razor's Edge. So if you use the Razor's Edge query tool to create a query and then you come into ReceipterPro, you will see that query here. Now, ReceipterPro is also smart enough to prompt you for any of the variables that you set your query up for in Razor's Edge. So if you have a query that you set up which will prompt you for a gift amount or a gift date, ReceipterPro will also prompt you for that same information. Let's take a look at the importing gifts via RE batch. When you click this option, ReceipterPro goes out to Razor's Edge and pulls in all of the batches that you currently have set up in Razor's Edge. So in this particular example, we can see that we've got about 5 batches here. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to select this last batch in the list. And what ReceipterPro is going to do, it's going to go out to Razor's Edge, pull in all of those gifts that belong to that batch. So with that batch selected, I'm going to hit this button here that says Process Selected Batches. ReceipterPro will then go out to Razor's Edge and it will query in the number of gifts that it finds in that batch, and it will say it's ready to import them. Do you want to import them now? And we're simply going to say yes. So we'll give this a few seconds while ReceipterPro gets all of the data from Razor's Edge, and it's just finished. So now what we can see is we have a list of gifts on the left that belong to that batch. Now, if you want to see a preview of the receipt for each of these gifts, you can simply click on the gift that you want, and the preview window on the right will refresh to reflect the receipt for that particular gift. So I'll take a few minutes and take you through this gift list table because there are some columns here that do need some explanation. The very first column here has an exclamation mark. This exclamation mark indicates that this particular donor is a VIP donor. So you would define within the ReceipterPro business rules what actually makes up a VIP donor. It could be a constituent attribute. It could be something that's a field that's set on the constituent record, but you can specify that. So if you see an exclamation mark in this very first column here, that means that this donor is designated a VIP donor. It just makes it easier for you to identify those gifts when you're receipting. Some organizations might not have eyes on every single receipt that goes out the door, but they definitely want to have eyes on all of those for their VIPs. The next column in the table indicates the delivery method for the receipt. Now, ReceipterPro supports printed receipts and e-receipts, and it uses a business rule to determine whether or not a constituent is e-receivable. And again, that's set up through business rules, so you can tell ReceipterPro what's the criteria for someone being e-receivable. If you see a little envelope icon in this column, that means that the receipt will be sent via email. If you see a little printer icon, that means that the receipt will be sent via printed mail. So it will print, and then you can put the receipt in the envelope. The next column here as a paperclip, this indicates a attachment to the receipt. So if you wanted to include something along with the receipt, you would see a paperclip in this column. The next column indicates the status. So right now you'll see that all of these gifts in the list have a gray status. That means that they have not currently been receipted yet. If you see a yellow icon here, that would indicate that the gift has already been receipted, and there are some other status colors as well. The next column is simply the gift ID. This is the gift ID in Razor's Edge. So if you needed to refer to that, you can do so via that column. The next column is the constituent name. Now this will be the constituent name or the name of the organization. So, and in this instance, the one that's highlighted, we can see that this is an actual constituent, but the one directly beneath it is actually a corporation. So ReceipterPro is able to distinguish between the two. The next column you'll see is the fund, and in this column you will see the fund ID first, followed with a dash, and then followed by the actual fund description. The next column is the batch number. So if you are on the batch import screen and you actually selected multiple batches, this is how you can tell which batch you're working in or which batch the gift is in. In this case, they're all the same because we just imported from one batch. And the final column here is the gift amount. Now notice that this column here because it's the gift amount, it might not actually be the receipt amount because ReceipterPro takes into account benefits. So you may see a gift amount of $125, but when you look at the receipt, you might see a receipt amount of 100, and that's why. So there are some really neat features about this list. For example, if you wanted to organize this list by constituent name, you could simply just hover your mouse over the constituent name column and drag it up to the top, and ReceipterPro will reformat the list and group them by constituent. So you can see here that we have most of these constituents only have one gift, but this particular constituent actually has 3 gifts that will be receipted during this session. So you can, if you're done with that, you can just click the column and drag it back down, and ReceipterPro will stop the grouping. And you can group on any of these columns. If you're receiving multiple batches simultaneously, it's a good idea to just take the batch column and drag it up here. That way ReceipterPro will organize all the gifts in the list by batch. So each time you click on one of these gifts in the list, ReceipterPro generates the receipt preview on the right side. So here we can see that this is the actual receipt that will be generated for the gift that we have selected. In this particular example, this is kind of an ACK receipt. So you've got a brief letter text at the top, and you've got your actual receipt information at the bottom. Receipts in ReceipterPro are template based, and we'll get into templates a little bit later, but just know that you can create these receipts to look however you want. And as you notice, you can import graphics into your receipts, position them wherever you want them, and you can also generate full colored receipts. So on the receipt preview screen, you have some additional options here. At the top, you have a refresh option. For example, you changed some data in Razor's Edge and you needed to refresh the preview, you can do that. Right here where it says email, this is your delivery methods. So we can tell that this person will be e-receipted, but if we wanted to override that, we can click the down arrow and we can click the print button, and this would print this receipt instead of e-receipting it. Another option is this edit mode. If you click edit mode, it puts you into the WYSIWYG editor, and you can actually type real changes to the receipt in real time. So that's helpful if you see something that you need to change, or if it's a one-off special message that you wanted to include on that particular receipt. Now, if you go into edit mode and you add something to the receipt, it's just for this particular receipt, so it does not affect any of the other receipts in the list. Okay, so now that I've shown you how you can modify a receipt using the edit mode, I'm going to show you a separate, different way of doing the same thing. So if you are previewing your receipts and you come across a receipt like this one that has a misspelling here, so we can see here by looking at this receipt template that there's a misspelling in the reference text. You could go into edit mode and fix that, but a better way to fix that would be to actually fix the Razor's Edge record, because that's where this reference text is coming from. So in order to fix that, all you have to do is simply double click on the gift in the list. And what that will do is that will launch the gift edit screen from Razor's Edge, right from ReceipterPro. So you don't have to go all the way back to RE and find the gift and all of that. You can just simply double click on it. It brings you to the gift edit screen. And here we can see in the reference line here, we can see where our two misspellings are. So we're going to correct those. Okay, once it looks good, you simply save and close like you normally would from Razor's Edge. And then ReceipterPro will automatically pick up those changes and refresh the gift to match the new data that you've specified in Razor's Edge. So those are two very easy ways to make changes to receipts before you send them. Okay, so let's take a look at some receipts that may be using a different template. Now, ReceipterPro can automatically determine which template to use based on a business rule. So you may have gifts that are of one particular fund that should receive a receipt, and then you have gifts of another fund that should receive a completely different looking receipt. And we have an example of that in this demo. You can see that this first gift here in the list has this kind of ACK receipt template. But if we click on, I believe it's this one right here, from John Smith, you'll see that the receipt looks completely different. And the reason for that is ReceipterPro is smart enough to be able to determine which receipt to apply to each gift. And it does that via business rules. And we'll touch on business rules a little later, but just know that you can define a criteria that tells ReceipterPro in which instance to use which template. And ReceipterPro is capable of mixing and matching the templates in one receipting session. So you don't have to generate all receipts matching one template and then come back later and do the same for a different template. Based on the business rules, ReceipterPro will automatically figure all of that out for you. So let's just assume that we've gone through these, all of these receipts, and they all look pretty good and we're ready to send them. So we can tell here by looking at this second column that a few of these are going to be e-receipted, but the majority of them are going to be printed. It looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 are going to be e-receipted. So what you can do when you're ready and you've looked at these and they all look correct, you click this process and send button. So I'm going to go ahead and click that. And ReceipterPro is going to ask us if we're sure that we want to process these receipts. So what it's going to do is it's going to start printing and start emailing these receipts out. So I'm going to say yes, everything is ready. And the first step it's going to do is just do some background work, getting all of the gift data collected. Okay, and now it's sending out the e-receipts. So it looks like we have 6 e-receipts that it's sending. And then it's going to start working on the printed receipts. Now, in this particular demo, we have printed receipts set up to actually not print They actually just come up in a window for me so that I can see them. But in your environment, those receipts will be printed. The last step ReceipterPro does is it creates PDF files for each of the receipts that it generates. So once it's done printing and e-receipting the gifts and generating all of the PDFs, you'll get this window that says congratulations. That's a picture of yours truly. So you can click the close button and you're basically done. You've just receipted these 16 gifts. Now, if you wanted to review where those PDFs are actually stored, you can just simply click this button at the top here that says View PDF Files. And what this does is this just opens up a Windows Explorer window, taking you to the PDFs. And the PDF file names are based on gift ID, so that you can easily find them, you can easily locate them later. So what I'd like to show you now is what happens if a constituent calls and says that they lost the receipt or the dog ate it or whatever happened to it and they need another copy of it. That's actually really easy to do in ReceipterPro. So what we'll do is we'll come up to this button here that says Create Receipts. So I'll click that button, and then we can come down here to Import Gifts via Custom Search. In this selector box, you are going to tell ReceipterPro exactly how are we going to find these gifts. So we're just going to use constituent ID, and I'm going to type in the constituent ID of the person, and I'm going to hit the Search Now button. Now what ReceipterPro has done is it's gone out to Razor's Edge and it's pulled in all of the gifts for that particular constituent. So now you can look through this list and you can say, okay, yep, this is the one that they want. And you could also multi-select as well. So let's go ahead and import this one. Okay, and ReceipterPro has now brought that gift into the system. Now you'll notice in this instance, instead of having a gray dot, we now have a yellow dot. A yellow dot indicates that the gift has already been receipted. ReceipterPro by default will not allow you to send a receipt twice, and it does that to make sure that you're not reissuing or resending receipts that you've already sent in the past. Now, to get around that, ReceipterPro has a reissue feature. So what we're going to do is we're going to go up to the top right corner of the receipt preview window and we're going to click this reissue button. When we do so, ReceipterPro brings up a box and it's asking us what we want to do with this receipt. How are we going to resend this receipt or reprint this receipt? So the first option is about the receipt number. Do you want to use the original receipt number, which is usually recommended, or do you want to generate a new receipt number for this receipt? In this case, it's a duplicate receipt. So we're going to tell ReceipterPro use the receipt number that you used before. And now we have the ability here to specify a stamp that will be applied to the receipt. So your options are no stamp, a replacement stamp, or a duplicate stamp. In this particular instance, the constituent has called and said they lost it, so they just need another copy. So we're going to apply a duplicate stamp to this receipt. So I'm going to click OK. And ReceipterPro has now marked this gift to be provisioned for reissuing. And if we scroll all the way to the bottom, we'll notice that this receipt has a duplicate stamp. Now, you can do the same process that you did before. If you needed to edit this, you could go into edit mode and make any changes that you wanted to make. And when you're ready to send this reissue, you simply click the process button like before, and based on constituent preference, it will print the receipt or it will email the receipt. So that's really how easy it is to generate receipts in ReceipterPro. You simply select your gifts, you review the receipts that it generates, and you hit the process button, and you can walk away. So let's talk a little bit about business rules. Business rules will define what type of template gets applied to a gift. You can use a business rule to determine what type of gifts will be receipted at all. For example, you may have some funds that you don't want to receipt. Okay, ReceipterPro can also use a business rule to determine whether or not someone is irreceivable. So if you have some criteria that you set up that determines whether or not someone should receive an e-receipt or printed receipt, or whether someone has opted out of e-receipts, etc. You can set up a business rule to do that. So let's just go into business rules, and I'll take you quickly through a couple of business rules. So here's our e-receipt business rule. So what this does is, let's see here, set delivery type to email is the description. So we're going to go into edit mode, and I'm going to show you how these business rules are set up. The initial screen is just the name and the description of the business rule. The next step defines what the action of the business rule is. In this case, this business rule is going to set the receipt delivery type to e-receipt. On the next screen, you define what the condition is for this business rule. And you can have multiple conditions for your business rules. And you can tell ReceipterPro only apply the business rule if all of the conditions are met, or apply the business rule if at least one of the conditions are met. So in this particular case, we only have one condition. So I'm just going to click on the edit button, and we're going to see what that condition is. So this business rule is looking at a constituent. So it's looking at the constituent record. And what is it looking at? It's looking at an attribute. Now this could also be a field, but in this case, we're looking at a constituent attribute. The next field allows us to establish which attribute we're looking at. In this case, we're looking at an attribute that's called e-receipt eligible. And now we're going to tell ReceipterPro if this constituent eligible attribute exists and its value is equal to yes, then the business rule applies and it will e-receipt. Let's look at a business rule that defines a template. This particular business rule right here will define which template gets applied. So you tell ReceipterPro during your initial setup what template is the default template to use, and then we create business rules for any exceptions to that rule. And in this case, we are applying a different template, and we're going to be using the template that's called generic new. And here are the conditions for this template. So we can see here that we're looking at the gift fund. So if the gift fund has a value of ATH, which is in our case, it's in our environment, that's short for athletics, this template will be used. Or if there is a attribute called wave priority, or if the gift fund is of type RMMF. So this business rule will be set if any one of these conditions are met. ReceipterPro knows to use this other template. Also, an important note is this checkbox near the bottom of the window that says do not allow this rule to be overwritten by a subsequent rule. This means that if this rule hits and it applies this template, it will not apply a different template based on the results of a further business rule. So that's very important. So we've talked a little bit about templates and how templates get applied. Let's actually take a look at what templates are and how we create templates. ReceipterPro has a built-in WYSIWYG editor that allows you to create your templates, and you can insert razor's edge fields into those templates. You can insert images, you can insert bold text, different font types, different sizes, etc. So when you come into the template editor, ReceipterPro will list out all of the templates that you currently have created. So here you'll see this is that generic new template that we were talking about earlier. This sample receipt is the one that you saw during our initial receipting session. And it will always give you a preview, so that if you have templates that are named very similar to each other, you can just click it, see the template, and say, oh, yep, okay, that's the one I want. So we're going to go ahead and make a small change to this template. So I'll just select the template, and we'll hit this little pencil icon right here. And what this is going to do is it's going to launch up the template editor. So this is a WYSIWYG editor. If you're familiar with like an application like Microsoft Word, then this will be very familiar to you. You've got the box here where you can just click anywhere you want, and you can add things, you can add text, add new paragraphs of information, set fonts, etc. Okay. You can also come over to the Insert tab, which is right here, and you can insert special symbols. So if you've got a copyright symbol or a registered trademark symbol, that sort of thing, you can easily insert special symbols into your templates. And you also have a button on the far right that's titled Razor's Edge Field. And this is the button you will use to add Razor's Edge fields into your templates. So we're just going to add a new field into this template. Just going to click this button, and it will bring up a screen that lists out all the current fields that are in Razor's Edge, and you can actually limit those fields by type. So if you know what you're looking for as a gift field, you could simply select the this little gift option here, and it will filter the list to only show you the gift fields in Razor's Edge. You also have a search feature here, so if you have an idea of the field that you want, maybe for example it's gift amount, you can just simply start typing in this list, and ReceipterPro will filter the list for all fields that match your search criteria. So I typed an amount because I want the gift amount to show up on this template. So I simply select the template and I click OK, and then ReceipterPro inserts into your template the verbiage that it needs in order to generate the receipt with that particular field. So that's really how easy it is to create these templates. And if you have many templates that are similar, you can create one version of that template and then simply duplicate that template in ReceipterPro to make it easier. You don't have to recreate the template all over again just for a minor change. So that is how templates work. Okay. So of course it will ask me if I want to save my changes. In this instance, I don't. There are some more settings here that deal with how e-receipts work, and this is where you specify the name that they come from, the reply to address, whether or not you want to attach a PDF copy of the receipt to the actual email, or whether you want that receipt to be a part of the body of the email. So there are a lot of options here for how e-receipts work. Now, in order for you to be CAN-SPAM 2003 compliant, you have to provide your constituents with a way to opt out from receiving e-receipts. ReceipterPro has a built-in opt-out system that will provide a link at the bottom of every template that your constituent could click on that would take them to an opt-out screen, so they can easily opt out of receiving e-receipts in the future. And ReceipterPro is smart enough, based on the business rule, not to e-receipt somebody who has opted out. So if you have a constituent who received an e-receipt and they opt out, ReceipterPro, the next time you go to receipt them, will simply print that receipt instead of emailing it to them. So that covers most of the functionality in ReceipterPro. There are some other features that we don't have time to get into today, but that covers the basic gist of it. You can receipt gifts, and as you can see, we receipted those 16 gifts in about under a minute. So when you compare the amount of time it takes to receipt gifts in Razor's Edge to ReceipterPro, there really is no comparison. So I want to thank you for attending today's demo, and you can contact us at www.receipterpro.com if you have any questions or you'd like to schedule a personal demo for your organization. Thanks for watching.